I'm going to give it a few moments for more people to join us. And I'm also going to get our closed captioning started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Logan Visionary Echo Conference. On behalf of the staff at the AVAM, as well as our founder, director, and principal curator, we welcome you to the Logan Visionary Echo Conference. Before we get started, please remember to keep your speaker view on. That will be located in the top right-hand corner of your Zoom interface. We ask that you use the chat box for any questions, especially if you have technical difficulties. Keep in mind that the audience is also welcome to access the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen and put forward a question to be voted upon. We will be taking questions from the audience for each presenter. Located in the chat box is a link to a live transcription. We are working on a more convenient closed captioning system for future events like this. Additionally, this event is being recorded and will be posted publicly later with closed captioning. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage our founder, director, curator, and proud tree hugger, Rebecca Hoffberger.
Oh. Thank you so much, Gage, for all the behind the scenes work that you did to make today possible, and to all our AVAM staff who are there helping today too. So welcome everybody. We're starting right on time. And I just want to say our Secret Life of Earth exhibition, which is the largest art, science, climate change, and state of our Earth exhibition anywhere, is now going to be continued, extended into the third week of January 2021. Our museum hopes to reopen by the latest next month. But all of you joining us today, thank you so much for being part of this extraordinary conference made possible by two amazing people. These are Dan and Gloria Logan, and every year we have kind of the Rolls Royce, I think we should name it, the metaphor should be the Tesla of speakers that amplify and deepen our exhibition theme and understanding the learning. And that is wholly made possible because of the generosity of these two sweethearts that you see right now. Thank you again, Dan and Gloria. Now today, we are trying to explain what you would feel like if you have not yet seen the Secret Life of Earth exhibition at our American Visionary Art Museum. As you walk in, behind the admission desk is a huge screen, and it is all moving. Right now we have a still from it. But what we wanted all of our guests to understand, virtual and in person, are the two forces that so impact our human life and all life. On the upper left, you see an image of the smoke from Northern California, and you can see that it travels so far, it stays coherent and will actually go for thousands of miles. Can you imagine the smoke that was generated by the Brazilian fires as well as the Australian fires? And on the lower right, we have the Sahara sand, and you see that that dust from the Sahara gets all the way pulled across the Atlantic Ocean and gives nutrients to South America's northernmost rainforest. And then we see the storms forming over the ocean. We have 5 names for oceans. We have 7 seas, but indeed, all the oceans are interconnected. We all breathe the same air, and we all are affected. The one blue ball that we live on is constantly changing. Next slide. Oh, the green monkeys. There are so many fabulous works of art in our current exhibition, but I'm showing you our green monkeys by an amazing artist named Johanna Burke, just to give you a little detail, because we speak here of our relationship to primates, but above all, when you leave today, I hope you'll go outside and you'll take note of all the variations of green, because our human eyes are hardwired to perceive more variation in the color green than any other color. It's such a feast in our lives. And the next one. This is such a wonderful lead-in to our keynote speaker today. This is a work by Australia's Peter Eglinton. It's quite a large work made from colored pencil and some collage, but it celebrates how fantastic fungi are. And our keynote today, Louie Schwartzberg, has worked so closely with our museum. He is a master at the art of thank you, of gratitude. And if you really want to be deeply moved, watch his little 5-minute films on his YouTube channel of Gratitude by Louie Schwartzberg, because they're something that we will never forget. So we are grateful to you, Louie, and today we present to you our very highest award, the Grand Visionary Honoree Award, which has gone to people like, you're in the club of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Dame Anita Roddick, civil rights activist Julian Bond, Daryl Davis, the great man who converted the hearts of 200 KKK Klansmen, so many extraordinary people, Carrie Fowler, Patch Adams, etc. And because we never give a plaque or something because it ends up in people's who do so much good work basement, we wanted to show you, wish we could give you this in person, but it will be in the US mails tomorrow. And next we'll show you what we're giving you, an expression so that you can wear. We got from you all your favorite colors, etc. And this is a jacket, so when you're out in nature, you can wear this proudly. It says right over your heart, American Visionary Art Museum, to let you know how dearly we care for you. And what makes you so worthy of this award is that quote that we just flashed: "The world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper." What you did for humanity, and I know even the Pope, you child of Holocaust survivors, that even the Pope had you come and project your images as Earth's foremost time-lapse photographer of nature, of the beauty. What you have done for all of us is that you have slowed down those things that our human eye and our busy, busy lives are too occupied otherwise to see how much beauty is embedded in creation. Or you have sped up the act of growing. So with that, will you please share with everyone your magic, and I hope that you will accept this award with the love that it is intended with it.
Oh, thank you so much, Rebecca. I love the jacket. I can't wait. I can't wait to put it on. I'll be the hit at Burning Man in 2021. I'm so proud to join, this eco conference today with the amazing lineup of climate scientists, researchers, and globally respected Earth activists. We are all Jedi warriors. And thank you, Rebecca. I'm so honored to receive the Grand Visionary Award. The Secret Life of Earth exhibit, I think it helps viewers understand and respect how precious our planet is and to understand nature's intelligence. It reminds us of the power and the beauty of pollination, ecosystem balance, and how everything in nature is interconnected. Because I believe that life is a force of energy that connects us to each other in the natural world. For the last 40 years, I've used time-lapse and slow motion cinematography to capture images that are either too slow, too fast, too small, or too vast for the naked eye to see. unveiling the mysteries that are the foundation of life on our planet. So when I was making my film Fantastic Fungi, the sequences of life in the mycelium underground were animated by artists using scanning electron microscopy imagery as references. Time-lapse sequences of mushrooms growing above the ground meant we had to use the art of lighting and time-lapse motion-controlled cinematography. And through that work, we can show viewers around the world the magic beneath our feet, that interconnected mycelial network that connects plants and trees in an underground economy where nutrients are shared without greed so ecosystems can flourish. What an inspiring example of how we humans can model our own communities, social, and political structures. The mother tree, Gage, there you go.
You have how much fungi are in the forest. As you're walking, there's about 300 miles of fungi under every footstep that you take, and that's all over the world. And they form these massive links. It's like a big web, just growing through the forest.
Mycelium that can grow out even just this big can have trillions, literally trillions of end branchings. Almost everyone knows about the computer internet. The mycelium shares the same network design.
Trees are communicating using the mycelium as pathways. They're connecting one tree to another. They're using the mycelium too to feed one another. In other words, one tree can swap nutrients with another tree using mycelium as the passageway.
So we often think of kin recognition as an animal behavior. Humans, we love our babies. We know it's our baby and we're going to look after that baby. Well, we never thought that plants could do that, but we're finding in our research that plants can recognize their own kin. So these mother trees recognize their kin through their mycorrhizal networks. The mother tree and the baby seedlings are sending signals, talking to each other. When they're connected together and carbon is moving between plants, the trees are supporting the weaker ones. If she knows that there's pests around and that she's under danger, she will increase her competitive environment towards her own babies so that they regenerate further away. It's a magical thing. And this could not happen without the fungi.
So that sense of interconnectedness and nature's intelligence is really at the heart of my life's work. And with this pandemic that we're experiencing right now, I think we understand how difficult it is to deal with being disconnected from friends and families. Nothing lives alone in nature. And making the invisible visible, I think, triggers our imagination, inspiring wonder and awe, which lies at the intersection of art and science. And as a filmmaker, I can stretch our imagination by creating journeys through portals of time and scale. I mean, have you ever imagined what it would be like to experience the world from the point of view of a mushroom or a flower or a hummingbird? When we can look at life from their perspective, it expands your vision, it opens your heart, unveiling the mysteries of life. And that truly is transformational. So how about taking a mushroom waltz with me? So, when we experience wonder, I think your whole mind and body is arrested by something so much larger than yourself. You become what you behold. These intense neurological storms of pleasure leave all kinds of residual benefits. I mean, we're left with increased feelings of well-being, compassion, and creativity. It enables us to adjust our perception of time, influence our decision-making, and we become more patient, more willing to help other people. And that makes life so much more satisfying. It turns out, I think, that blowing your mind is a medicinal, and it's good for the soul, because you can lose your ego and commune with the divine. Wonder and awe inspires us and brings us into the present moment. It makes us feel rich in time. When was the last time you felt rich in time? So it's a lifelong journey to find beauty in everything. And if you make it a practice, it'll transform your life. You don't have to own a camera. Just open your eyes to how light illuminates your world. I'm always aware of the light, dappled light, backlight, diffused light. It's all so, so wonderful. We are all born with a sense of wonder. Sometimes it's triggered by astonishing feats, monuments to mankind's capabilities, extraordinary talents and gifts, or scientific discoveries that push the boundaries of comprehension. But more often, we experience wonder by truly seeing the world around us. Wonder and awe allow us to transcend the ordinary. Even to test our concepts of time and scale. We are overcome with a sense of being small in a grand universe. We're unaware of past or future. We are, as they say, in the moment. We use the word breathtaking to describe it because it actually takes our breath away. Wonder inspires us to open our hearts and our minds to engender gratitude. So I wanted to share with you what inspired me to discover nature's wonders. Because a lot of times people ask me, did I grow up in nature? Well, not exactly. As a kid growing up in Brooklyn, I didn't experience nature because if my parents didn't do it, neither did I. I think racing popsicle sticks down the gutter was my first whitewater experience. My parents were Holocaust survivors. They were in Auschwitz, and they met after the war in a relocation camp in Germany. They knew each other for 2 weeks before they decided to get married. And friends who they had just met stood in for their parents to walk them down the aisle. They came to America with my older sister, and they were resilient. And living under their roof, I saw how grateful they were for every blessing that came their way. Food on the table, a roof over your head, a steady job, but most importantly, the gift of being able to have children. To them, that was heaven on earth. And looking at life through that lens of gratitude had a profound effect on me. I grew up and I wanted to make the world a better place and to fight for social justice. So I headed off to UCLA to major in history and political science, but I really couldn't study the French Revolution when there were war protests happening right outside my classroom. We rebelled, the students rebelled, because they wanted to stop an unjust war. And like my parents, I needed to bear witness in order to tell that story. There were no camera phones back then, so I quickly learned photography and I documented the protests, including the undercover FBI agents who were there taking photos of us and arresting the student leaders. Photography was my way to protect myself and others from being beaten for expressing our First Amendment freedom rights. and documenting the police brutality was a way to resist. So I handed in these black and white photo essays for my political science class, which was a lot easier for me than writing a paper. And I found my voice. I fell in love with photography and filmmaking. We're going through a similar period of breakdown and breakthrough that we had during that repressive Nixon era. The silver lining is that it spawned Earth Day and the liberation movements for women and people of color. Today, the battleground is consciousness, grabbing your attention, your eyeballs. Politicians can do it by being dark and vulgar and racist, pushing our primal fear buttons. And we can counter that with something more powerful that grabs your emotions, beauty and wonder, shining a light into the darkness, connecting and opening our hearts to shift our behavior and to celebrate life. We need to be resilient and to make our voices heard. So filmmaking enabled me to explore these natural rhythms and patterns that awaken the deepest part of my soul. And I met my greatest teacher. She taught me the language of composition and lighting and color and movement. She taught me how to live a creative and sustainable life, because Mother Nature doesn't waste a single molecule, and she'll never take more than what she needs. Here is a montage of nature's patterns and rhythms that touch all of us because it's a fingerprint of the energy of a living universe. So I know a lot of you will be curious. That last shot was glowworms we shot last year in New Zealand in an underground cave. I don't think anyone had ever done time-lapse time exposures. They move at night, which is such a mind blower. So when I graduated from UCLA, I moved to a little town called Elk in Northern California. And I wanted to shoot 35mm movie film, but I didn't have any money, but I did have a sense of wonder. So I took these old movie cameras that were built in the 30s to shoot time-lapse. And these cameras had these heavy AC powered animation motors, you know, to shoot like Disney type animation with a long extension cord. I couldn't go very far. So a friend of mine, he made electric guitars for the Grateful Dead. And he helped me build a motor that ran on flashlight batteries so I could take these heavy cameras outdoors. Filming time-lapse and 35mm movie film had never been done before. And I turned it into an art form and a new addition to our visual vocabulary. So I started to chase the light, shadows moving through the forest, and shafts of light in desert canyons, fog rolling in and out, and flowers. Flowers who seduced me with their color, taste, touch, and aroma. But more than that, I learned that the flower is the greatest biological invention that changed life on Earth, because flowers put their DNA into little energy packets called fruits, nuts, seeds, vegetables. And warm-blooded mammals would not have evolved if we didn't have flowers. This happened more than 50 million years ago. Pollination, this relationship between flowers and pollinators, we cannot let that beautiful relationship unravel. So it's time to become a flower. Great. You know, I think too many nature documentaries exploit the story of predator versus prey, that macho story of kill or be killed. The real story of nature is not only survival of the fittest, it's also survival of the kindest. And we need a paradigm shift in our consciousness to embrace that new story and let go of that old narrative of competition and dominance. The feminine story of nature is all about relationships. It's about partnering, networking, regeneration, giving birth, nurturing, creating ecosystems that flourish without greed. It's why they call it Mother Nature. Bringing virtual nature into our home is a gift, because what I want to do is, I'm not just showing a mountain looks like or what a river looks like. I'm making the invisible visible by helping viewers feel the wonder and awe that we see in nature through a shift in time and scale. Beauty is nature's tool for survival because we protect what we love, and we're hardwired to do that. It's why puppies are cute, and kittens are cute, and babies are cute. DNA wants us to move, forward, and they came up with this incredible idea called reproduction, because everything in the universe wears out. So we literally do stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, and we're responsible for future generations. So I believe world care equals self-care. And scientific studies have shown that today, we're all suffering from nature deficit disorder. Many of us are isolated by lives that are far away from the natural surroundings that can comfort us and heal us. So I'm working to bring digital nature into healthcare. This doesn't replace taking a walk in the woods, but it can inspire you to engage with nature. Because once you see magic moments you may never otherwise experience, it'll change your life forever. So currently I'm working with the Jacobs Medical Center at UC San Diego, and in all 250 rooms, and they have an iPad with AirPlay to a TV screen. And we ask the patient, where in the world do you want to go to be healed? Where's your power spot? And their choices are forest, ocean, desert, flowers. We're giving patients the power of choice when choice has been taken away from them. And we're hoping for positive health outcomes like lowering blood pressure, heart and respiration rates, reducing anxiety and addiction to painkillers, better sleep and shorter hospital stays. I mean, studies indicate that doctors and nurses are helped as well, and they can become better caregivers, and they could use a little healing energy as well. I believe that nature imagery is like a mirror, a homecoming for every cell in your body to jump up and rejoice by recognizing and remembering our connection to nature and the universe. Did you know that 80% of the sensory data we get comes into our eyes? We have healing modalities for all the other senses: aromatherapy for smell, massage for touch, musical therapy for healing, healthy food for taste, and why not vision? Mandalas are an ancient healing modality which receives, and rejoices in our sense of sight. I think mandala means sacred circle, and it's derived from natural patterns. The curve of the circle, the unfolding of a flower, and the sweep of a wave. Mandalas tap into sacred geometry, and these geometric patterns that repeat nature reflect the intelligence and the interconnectedness of nature. So everything you saw was 100% organic, okay? So science continues to bear out what I think I've learned from my years of personal experience. Immersion in nature increases creativity, kindness, and compassion because we are nature. I believe in using digital nature as a bridge technology to reconnect people with the essence of their souls. Imagery that you might never see, even if you're healthy and have the time and money to travel to distant locations. I use art and science to capture magic moments, and digital displays can bring these immersive experiences into our lives. Experiences that I believe can open our hearts to protect what we love. Thank you.
Oh, Louie, there is a question for you. There are actually quite a few, but one, I know that Apple TV is going to be mainstreaming your, come this Tuesday, Fantastic Fungi, but can you direct people to your website? Because there was a question which says, how can I share or stream Fantastic Fungi with my nonprofit?
Yes, so go to fantasticfungi.com and there'll be lots of information how to link to the movie, and it's ready to go.
Well, Louie, thank you for that beginning such a wonderful conference today, being our co-host and our keynote, as well as our honoree. again, I can't wait to see you wear that in person. Let's see if we have one more question from anyone. I have from Melissa. It says she saw, how are the mandalas generated, the natural ones?
So it's all like imagery that I've filmed. And then you take sort of like a sliver of that image in a pie shape, and then you replicate it into a circle. And that's how I create the mandala.
All right. Well, we don't have applause you can hear from everyone, but I want everybody to give their heart to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Holy, that's wonderful. So next, I thought about your imagery with the monarchs when I deal with how brave you have to be to go against the forces of greed to protect nature. And our next speaker is another hero of ours, of mine particularly, and it's Julia Butterfly Hill. If you don't know the legendary Julia Butterfly Hill, you may know her story, that to protect the giant redwoods that she spent 2 years and 8 days up at the 18th story level of that tree without ever coming down, despite one of the coldest winters that year, until she had achieved from the people who owned those trees an agreement that they would not chop it down nor acreage around it. There was no one really who has ever done what you have done, but we have also made heroes of the steward of Mexico's monarch butterfly historic preserve, because loggers actually murdered them, the two who were this past year. So Julia, I know we're just doing instead of slides and you have so many incredible images, but I want to ask you 2 questions and then we're going to throw it to the audience. Okay. One, building on Louie's belief or conviction that beauty is something that makes us fight to preserve. Can you share, in your whole life of being immersed in so many nature experiences that are rare and amazing, could you share that one that feeds your soul, that one moment of intimacy and beauty in nature that changed your life?
Well, I first have to say that all through Louie's presentation, I was like, exactly, yes, hallelujah, yes. I felt so much resonance, and I actually welled up with tears more than once. I was like, I can't even watch this because I'm going to be a sobbing mess when it comes to my turn, because I feel things so deeply. And for me, it was the pivotal moment wasn't just because of the beauty. It was actually the combination of the beauty and the horror of the devastation of that beauty that made it impossible for me not to act. And I have appreciated nature my whole life. It's always been my caregiver. It's been my teacher. It's been the place I go to for refuge since I was a little girl. My name Butterfly actually comes from the fact that when I was a little girl, I was hiking in the mountains in Pennsylvania, and a butterfly actually landed on me and spent hours on me as I hiked in the mountains. And it went from my shoulder to my head and back to another arm, but it actually stayed on me for a couple of hours. So Butterfly actually became part of my name when I was somewhere around 7 or 8 years old because of that experience. So I've always had these incredible experiences with nature. But when I was in California for the first time and I entered the ancient redwoods, I can't even talk about it without tearing up. It was so special. I was raised in a preaching household. My father was a preacher, and so I spent my entire life growing up in churches, and I always felt like something was missing. And when I entered the redwoods for the first time, I was like, oh, this is what God is. This is what church is. It was so profound that all these years later, it still moves me to tears. And then I had so much energy coming to me from the forest that I started to run. And as I ran through the forest, it was just like the smells, the colors, the shape, everything just immersed into me, and I became one with it. And then as I ran through the forest and ran into a clear cut. And in California, when they do these clear cuts, they not only log an entire section, they then pile all the twigs and branches from the trees they felled. They put it into a pile and they light the entire thing on fire. And so going from this ancient, gorgeous forest into an area that literally looked like a bomb had dropped off, it was that juxtaposition that made me realize I had to take action. The beauty inspires us, but it is the knowing that that beauty is at risk, whether it's in our human relatives or animal relatives, any part of our earth relatives. It's seeing the pain and the devastation and the loss or the potential of those things that for me is what motivated me to not only know that I was one with all, but then to realize that my life needed to be in service of that knowing.
Oh, you know, Julia, I love so much how you think and how you write. I encourage everyone to read your books because we led with them actually in the introduction of the whole exhibition. And one of the many wise things you've said was, why is everything good for our bodies, our communities, our world, and our planet called the alternative? That means everything bad for us is the accepted norm. So would you please just say, if you were to say a handful of things you wish everybody listening really understood, what would be your top priorities that they go away from today thinking about and knowing in their hearts?
Well, one of them is what Louie already touched on, is recognizing that we are part, and as you've mentioned, like that, and what the purpose of this exhibition is that we are all one. And COVID is actually reminding us how one we all are, that there is no such thing as separation. And separation is the disease in our mind that makes us think we are separate from each other, separate from the earth, separate from the animals, separate from the water, the sky, all of it. Our world has been crafted to make us feel separated. And COVID is this response to the disease of our disconnect, feeling that we are disconnected. And what it's here to teach us is that the only way through is to remember our connection, to feel our connection. Because once we feel it, we have to do something, whether it's through art, through activism, through teaching, whatever it may be. Once we feel the connection, not just have it as a, oh yeah, I know we're connected, but a deep, deep sensory feeling, then we begin to live our lives as connected instead of as separate from. And for me, one of the things I also tell people is like, it's not so much a specific as it is, if we shift our awareness and our consciousness, we start asking ourselves, what would love have me think, speak, and do in this moment? Because love demands connection. And it's not just a spiritual foo-foo thing, because I tell people, like, love has been the hardest teacher I've ever chosen to take on, because she mandates me to be better than I know myself to be over and over and over again. But that's what love does. The mind will see obstacles that the heart refuses to accept. The heart will say, I have to act even if it's dangerous. I have to make this choice even if it's not as easy as the other choices I make. But it's no longer than a sacrifice. Love is an offering. Love is a gift. So it's not about giving up or sacrificing. It's about, how do I use my life in a way that is in service to this oneness, to all that I love, to all that I care about. And if we ask that question every single day, we start looking in our own life, like, how can I align my daily choices more in alignment with the world I want to live in? How do I live in a way that has less of a negative impact and more of a positive impact? How can I reach out into the world for the things that move me most? And instead of asking what would fear or anger have me do, saying what would love have me do? And it was very transformative for me, because when I was first up in Luna in the tree, I could see the mill that takes all these beautiful ancient forests and turn them into lumber. I could see it right from where I sat. I could see all the clear cuts and mudslides. And I was so overcome with anger in the beginning that it was starting to kill me. And then I realized I didn't climb up into that tree because I was angry at corporations and at corrupt government officials. I climbed up in that tree because I was in love with the forests, and I was in love with this magical planet, and that had to be what drove my choices. And from that moment forward, everything in my life has changed. Like, what we call sustainable is actually just about recognizing we're one and living in a way that honors that. So everything in my life began to change from that. And I think if each one of us start with those two awareness, we are all truly one, even if we don't like it, we're all one. And that if we have the premise of love, what would love have me think, speak, and do in this moment? everything in our life begins to change. And my experience then is because we are all connected, everything around us begins to shift as well.
Oh, well, thank you. I want to see whether there is a question that comes from the audience. Do you feel also living in Luna was an enhancement to your own intuitive nature? What's interesting, what you didn't bring up, that we bring up because you have informed us that 97% of the original old growth redwoods have been already commercially logged.
That's correct, yeah. And much of that in the last 250 years. So forests that are millennia old have been almost completely wiped out in 250 years. And when I was dealing with the corporation, their spokesperson would love to say, well, for those activists, enough is never enough. And I was like, you guys have taken 97%. Like, when is enough for you? We're actually struggling to hold on to a tiny fraction that is a biodiversity bank that we will never be able to replace. We can't grow a biodiversity bank. We might be able to grow some trees, but we can't grow the magic and the mystery that nature does through the biodiversity and ecological evolution that happens. We can't do that. And if we continue to destroy this, we're losing the true wealth of our planet, the true wealth of our entire family that includes all. And we're stealing from the future generations as we do it. So that's why we do this work, to hold on to these pieces of the biodiversity bank, because we know that it's not really even about ourselves, but rather the collective whole, that this is in the investment in all of us.
There is a question that came up, and I get this a lot, and I refer people to your book and your story, but they said your story reminds them of the character in The Canopy. And I've heard this from other people. Can you please comment on that?
In The Canopy, is that the Overstory book or a different book?
I think the Overstory is the one as well, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely,
well,
Overstory.
I have a little bit of a challenge with that book, because the man who wrote it actually pulled pages parts right out of my book and put it into his story, without asking for permission, without donating anything to the cause, nothing. Literally, pretty much stole from my story and used it to create his story. But his story that's why everyone knows it reminds them of me, because he literally lifted out of my book to write his story. And it's really hard for me, because that's happened to me over and over and over again in my life. And I'm like, look, I literally sacrificed everything in my life, nearly losing my life, yes, on behalf of these forests. And now you're not just stealing from me, you're stealing from what I stood for. But it has happened to me a lot because I've become a public figure. So as much as I'm glad that his book is inspiring people to think about the forests and the trees, it's a little painful for me that it continues this legacy of like privilege and privilege taking from others. And that is heartbreaking to me. And I know from listening to things that he said that it's probably not his intention, but it's the way we have this unforeseen bias in our minds, many of us, that has us do things and not recognize what it's really impacting others.
Thank you for responding. And I hope he will see this, and I hope he will come and realize. I know that the loggers had succeeded in killing another tree sitter, and that they really did their best to really blow you out with the helicopters out of the tree to your death. And people don't realize this is not, cartel who want the logging privileges where the monarchs are in Florida. This is, today. So it's serious business. I remember when Bonnie Raitt gave you her Grammy, dedicated it to you. There are no words to thank you for how you have lived your life and how much you've always kept our museum in your heart as well. Do you want to tell that story?
I love what you do. And I love that it does inspire people, and inspire means to breathe in spirit. And so when we breathe in spirit, something magical begins to happen. And that's part of what there's so much that you do that I love and that I believe in supporting, but that's part of it. And for me, it's also about reminding all of us that every single choice we make makes a difference. Every single one, because we don't live in a vacuum. It is actually scientifically impossible to have no impact and make no difference. Scientifically impossible. So that every single choice we make makes a difference. And I've seen that in your curating. You're just magical in how you choose each piece in an exhibit that creates this whole experience that's just profound. So what you do also reminds each and every one of us that every choice we make makes a difference.
Two quick questions. How do you relate to Greta Thunberg? Did you two hook up in any way, meet each other? No?
No, I've never had the chance to meet her, and I'm very in awe of her courage and how much she's been able to mobilize so many people. It's interesting because when I did my action, it was 97 to 99. It was like cell phones were still the size of a brick, you know, like we didn't have all the technology we have now. And so it was a different way to get the message out. And now with all the social media and everything, she's been able to really magnetize and empower so many young people who feel the same way and don't know how to act or speak about it. She's been this megaphone for young people all over the world. And I also have sent prayers for her because I know what happened to me once I got in the spotlight. It can be brutal. And so even though I've never had a chance to talk to her, I've prayed for her many, many times that the universe and the angels and the mystery and the magic of life help her navigate what happens when you end up in the public spotlight in the world today.
Well, that was a great question. And I think there's just one more here that we're going to do. How do you lovingly invite angry people to shift to love?
Well, the first thing is we have to allow anger to be allowed. When I was growing up, anger wasn't allowed, and it's very destructive. I tell people that if you're not angry at the world today, you're probably not awake. But it's like, okay, how do we acknowledge our anger? And then underneath that, realize that our anger is there to defend us from a pain of some kind. So the anger has a right to be there and it's needed, because if we're not angry, we're not awake, we're not feeling. The anger is the defense mechanism to protect us from something that's hurting us. And so if we can tap into that, first allow anger to have its right to be there, but then shift underneath and say, what's really causing this anger? And when we can get to that place, then we can allow the anger to be there, but act from love, act from connection, act from courage, instead of acting from fear and from anger. Even though they still have their right to be there, they're not what generates the choices anymore.
Oh, well, my darling friend, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. So wonderful to see your face, even from a distance.
And thank you all for such great questions. I'd like to introduce someone that I wish we were all physically together to meet, but this is a force majeure, I would say, the North American director of the organization called 350.org is Tamara Toles O'Laughlin. I had the privilege of hearing her speak at a nature conservancy, but this is someone who is so devoted to people and our relationship here to Earth. So Tamara, again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a great day to share space with lifelong advocates working in so many parts of our interconnected world. I know we're going to talk a little bit about my hopes, but I just want to start a little bit by talking about the fact that everyone has referenced that we are in a moment of uprising. We flag that we're in a movement space where the earth contains us as multitudes and we're only just a fractal as a species. So thinking about where we are in this moment where all of the different things we have built are coming together, we're really seeing connectivity across silos that we built in the innermost parts of the work, and that didn't just happen. So I'm super excited to be here in this conversation because I want to give some space to how that relationship really shows up in the work of People and Planet. In this moment of uprising for Black lives at 350, we call it Climate for Black Lives, we are in the middle of a public struggle, but it isn't the first, it isn't even the 50th. Global Witness has recently put out its annual report that 212 environmental activists have been killed in 2019. That's more than ever. So we're in a moment where so much of what we are doing is emerging to the surface. We are still under threat as people who just want to be able to do our practice and show up for People and Planet together. But we couldn't have this moment for Black lives or for public struggle if we hadn't started wakening people up. The public struggles for freedom from fossil fuel extraction and struggles against the KXL and Dakota Access Pipeline really started to move the public consciousness from calls to divest and to defund. And what they have in common is that they're all just placeholders for moving away from extraction and degradation to an investment in people in a new and visionary economy. When these kinds of movements happen, uprisings occur, every one of us is called to respond. And our response should include our ability to align our energy to serve the moment rather than just send out a statement or throw down some money or and it really calls us to get into relationships. So much of that was referenced by our speakers prior, the Keynote and Julia Butterfly Hill, Louie Schwartzberg. We really are all saying it plainly that the moment is dynamically powerful and the groundwork for all of it is laid by our interconnection, where we all pitch in and show up as we are to do our part. This is really evident as climate power emerges in amongst a political moment and showed up as calls for justice that flank long known and well-held environmental truths about how pollution impacts us all, how it's played out in the devastation of COVID. And what we see internally, externally is just indicative of full networks pushing towards a shared framework for political moment and moving beyond just the politics of a national election, but really setting us up beyond our individual agendas towards a common cause. The climate movement is truly coming together with movements for justice. And it is my sense that this reckoning is a display of our understanding that we're just one, but one is all, small is all. And it's not just the last moment of systems that we have built failing, but design failing because it doesn't include the largest number of us. And movements themselves, that interconnection like fungi, are the reason why the alignment is now possible. So I just wanted to flag that in being a part of this conversation, I wanted to raise up our not inconvenient participation in whether we're making progress or we're going backward. And I'll share in the chat just some good reads that really dig in on that.
I'd like to ask you or to share with you in our current exhibition, Tamara, we have the relationship of poor people to all over the world to environmental distress. And just simply even we give the zip codes, the 3 zip codes in Baltimore City, where they are 3 times more likely to have visits to the emergency room for asthma. And it's not because the people are somehow flawed, it's because that's where we stick all our most noxious, toxic industry, et cetera. Could you speak to 350's work, in terms of, whether it's Flint with water, et cetera, sanctity, what it is you're most passionate about?
Sure. So at 350, we're passionate about the end of fossil fuels, not because we like to pick on big movers in industry, but really because we want to take a systems look. So all of what we're doing is thinking about how our fixation on money as a driver of what we consider valuable has tainted every other thing that we've built. So exactly what you talked about, the concentration of wealth creates the concentration of harm, and those 2 things mean we have to get into better relationship. So in our calls to end fossil fuels, we're actually demanding that we stop doing things that we know are harmful and start investing that same energy into things that can support us. Focusing on money, which really ruffles people's feathers around the idea that we talk about our relationship rather than how we might otherwise relate if we remove our humanity. Calling for leadership that responds to science and justice, and holding both of those accountable so that the art that that we're able to create is a through line in our work. It's actually a part of our activist work that makes us pretty unique, is that we have always from day one seen art activism as a singular force that runs through our work. The way that we explain who we are, what we want, what the vision of the future looks like. We demand that people pick up a paintbrush, that they join us in building something, that they make a thing that feels like the struggle that they're in, and they communicate that. We often, as a part of our national work in climate strikes, working with youth activists or multi-generational, multiracial organizing, often figure out what is the art footprint that we leave behind. How do we leave a message in a place where you might not see it? How do we express with our words and images, our hands and ourselves, how our impacts are so united and connected? How do we tell stories that speak as if we're showing up in a place of equity, where the fight I'm not in is related to the fight I am in? And if we argue for each other and show up as whole human beings as we do this work, we will be demanding a thing that gives us more opportunities to sort out the rest. So the last big work that most people would have seen us do was climate strikes. So that was 7.6 million people showing up in the same place on the same day and over a course of a week to demand that a real action happens on climate before it's too late. If we have 10 years in the climate decade to act, we really only have 2 or 3 years to get the political framework in place that allows us to move the big pieces. How do we speak to each other as individuals and in pods? How do we connect across our governments? And how do we demand the things that we need now? Because it is our shared resources, common, natural, and the things we have built together that will give us the momentum we need to save what we can.
Wonderful. I just wanted to say, one of the things I've been acutely aware of is the role that Maryland plays, where more creative intelligence is applied to weaponry than any other place on earth. The historic home of Army chemical warfare, Army biological warfare, nanotechnology is applied to warfare, et cetera, et cetera. But all those brilliant minds, I'm really hoping that we will come together to a scenario where we see really weapons into plowshares in the most palpable way, because I think so much new non-fossil fuel technologies have already been birthed, and what we need is to judiciously declassify the things that can uplift humanity. Oh, Tamara, I'm just so thrilled to have you here. If there's a question from the audience for Tamara, or from staff, you are right, a treasure right here in Maryland. Do you spend most of your time here?
Yeah, I live in Baltimore, so I do. As a North American director, I could work from anywhere. And I know while folks are thinking about questions, let me give you something to think about. If I could leave you with just a handful of things, I'll tell you, as was already mentioned, it's all connected. Movements for peace and justice, for fair housing and zoning, transit and resources, they feel very wonky and very weighty, but our evolution has not found a way to get past the fact that we need each other to get it done. Second, climate work is social justice. I often tell people that climate work or environmental work used to be land use and zoning and a whole lot of other things before we figured out how to put it under one umbrella, but it all operates as a leaf on the tree, on the branch of social justice. Without responding to our calls for humanity, we cannot solve any of these other problems. Third, to divest or to defund is to take stock of our place in the shared work, and to demand that we put our energy and resources into what sustains us rather than what extracts or what degrades. So much of the speakers prior really touched on some of those pieces, so I just wanted to lift them up. Fourth, allyship is not agreement. Like, we don't have to agree to everything to agree that we're going in the right direction. As we vote, divest, as we support, as we perform research, as we weaponize our various forms of privilege, we can hold time for further alignment, but we might not, that time won't ever come if we don't agree on the big things. Also, the fifth thing is a thing that doesn't often come up in activist work, but really shows up in the ways we relate, as you pointed out. In DC, Maryland, and Virginia, Maryland is such a home of contradiction, of things that are built up alongside another and aren't necessarily looked at across their silos. We built these cities out of the country. So as we build solutions to take up our shared ownership, we have to remember that what is determines what we will be. And those things that we choose to see and those things that we choose to avoid seeing are the key to where we're going. So recognizing that just like we built the city out of the country, we can unbuild, we can undo, we can decide what we spend our energy on, what we spend our money on, what we devote ourselves to, and going forward. And it seems like there's some interesting questions popping up there.
Yes, Tamara, there's a question on really what is your, can you comment on the impact of the meat industry and meat consumption?
So I have a personal lifestyle answer about that. I haven't eaten meat in 26 years, but as far as movement driving activism, I recognize that we're in a global moment where people operate so differently and access to resources is so very different, that while greenhouse gas emissions could be driven a lot by people's choices, going into someone's home and asking them to stop eating the only thing they have access to or a thing that they're in relationship with doesn't feel like the biggest bang for our buck. And bringing part of why we've chosen to focus on fossil fuel extraction is because that singularity, 7 out of 10 parts of the footprint that are driving us towards climate are related to fossil fuels. And we could choose every day not to spend our money that way, not to turn everything into plastic, not to create so much waste. So rather than literally taking food out of someone's mouth, it feels like the better thing we could do as people is to demand that we stop subsidizing a system that is hurting us with our own resources. So yes, and would be the answer to that question. Yes, and I think we could focus on what doesn't remove options from people.
Thank you so much, Tamara, and for the response to that question. Our exhibition really lays out in great detail the impact of meat eating, and we have the sense of what we love about our museum is that people who don't agree with us are so enchanted by its beauty that they come in and they hear things they would never be exposed to in a non-threatening way. And we often ask, if you love meat, and that's something you do every day of your life, even if you could commit to one day of every week that you would not eat meat, that would help so much. And we explain it in detail that they can take away with them as well. So thank you. And I'm so glad that you're such a treasure, both for North America, but that we have you right here. I'd like to introduce right now one of our most esteemed artists and wise women, Judy Tallwing. Has been such a deep part of our museum from the moment she moved here to Baltimore. She's an Apache elder, and she has this prayer that comes from her tradition. I would like to show the one detail of her painting. This is a large painting called Spirit Bears, and you cannot imagine how gorgeous it is in person, with diamond dust in the water and all the crushed garnets that are made into the rocks. Everything is alive with prayer beads embedded throughout. But this is a very special painting that came to our museum through Judy in the most wonderful way. Judy's in her 7th decade. I'm right behind her. But when she was a little girl in the Southwest of America, her grandmother said there is there's Spirit Bear Island up on Princess Royal Island in Canada, that it is the northernmost rainforest. And she said, Creator has given the spirit bear, which are always born to pure Black Komodo bear parents. Every 10th or 12th cub, they birth a pure white bear. And that the spirit bears have been given this island to live in peace and harmony forever. And if ever human beings disrupt that harmony, then it's over for humankind. And just as Judy gave us this painting, we heard on the news that the Keystone Pipeline was coming through. So we are so happy now to just someone so dear to our museum share a prayer. And she taught us all how to say, Yatehe Shona, walk in beauty.
Yatehe
my
Shona.
friend."
It means to walk in beauty, my friend. I'm going to give the prayer in Apache first, and then I'm going to say it in English, if that works for you. It's something that, a prayer that we say every time there's a gathering, and this is from the Mescalero part of my family. And if you can think about walking a good path, because that's what this prayer is all about, is asking for that. Bikego and Danish Danley, Hansuku Nahin Sharara, Nashi Gunshli, Naishishi, Naite, Ibich, Hanshugu, Naha, Naunche. Yeah, Atie, it means thank you very much. And I have to look. I'm just relearning my language. I was in Indian school when I was young and not allowed to speak Apache. So it's been an interesting journey to relearn. And I'm old, so I can't see what I'm doing. In English, it's great Creator. Look over us in a good way. Help us to walk in a good way. Be generous with us and keep it strong with us. We thank you.
Oh, thank you, Judy, so much for just being with us today. We recognize that the land that we have our community on now was not ours to take and to sell. So thank you so much. Now we will go to another local treasure, and that is Stephen Kaii-Ziegler, who cares passionately about what all the little updates on the state of life in Maryland. And in our exhibition, we talk about the geological forces that form the Chesapeake Bay that cause the earth to actually recede, to sink at twice the level of any other part of our East Coast. So Stephen is here to give us from his amazing work, with the Maryland climate change impact study. He's up on the latest news. So Stephen, please share with us. And thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for inviting me to participate. I have to say, listening to the presenters and the words and slides that they're showing is, it's pretty awe-inspiring. I don't necessarily get to work in those fields, but it doesn't mean I can't appreciate it. And I want to say, when we talk about fungi, butterflies, redwood, or old growth forest, and social issues that we're all dealing with, I think someone said it earlier. It's all connected, because it is all connected, and so I appreciate just having the opportunity to participate. And I do want to say, I don't know if you knew this, Rebecca, but I was born in Flint and spent the first 10 years of my life there. So I have family in the area. I'm going back in 2 weeks, and so understanding what's happening now is pretty heartbreaking. So. But I bring a different perspective to this. I've spent 32 years in kind of the land use and zoning world, for the most part, in Maryland, Virginia, some in North Carolina. And we're going to talk about a couple of specific things that are happening, and then really go on to some things that are also happening that we're very hopeful can have an impact. So we're going to talk a little bit about sea level rise, nuisance flooding, and significant weather events, real examples. So new slide, please. So the examples are going to be Fox Island, the city of Annapolis, Ellicott City. Some of you but probably most of you don't know about Senate Bill 457, and probably most of you don't know about the Climate Change Academy. Next slide. So we have I think you said over 400 people registered, and I'm hoping some folks had an opportunity when they were in school to visit this marvelous place. This is Fox Island, and it's located in the Tangier and Pocomoke Sounds off of Virginia. This building that you see was originally constructed in 1929 for fishing and hunting. And it became an environmental education program site for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation in the 1970s. And unfortunately, as a result of sea level rise, it was closed in 2019, which is a very sad thing. So next slide. So this is a kind of a bit of an interactive slide. This is Great Fox Island. It's right in your screen on the slide, and you'll see an example of what the island looked like in 1999 and then what it looks like in 2019 from a satellite view. It's kind of pretty scary how much of it has disappeared. The building is still there, but there's no way to get through it through the boardwalks. Okay, next slide. Again, this is another satellite view. On the left is from 1994, and on the right is from 2019. And you can see the degree of sea level rise that has basically inundated the island. And this is really what Rebecca's getting at. We have a large number of barrier islands up and down the East Coast. The topography of the land, the elevation's very low. And so as sea level rises and the impacts that come with it, we are losing more and more land, and we're losing it at a much faster rate than the majority of the country. So next slide. Probably everyone has either been to or heard about the city of Annapolis. This is like a drone picture of Annapolis. This is where I live, by the way. And it's on the Severn River and Spa Creek. So this is what Annapolis looks like on a sunny day. And now we're going to go to the next slide. And so this is a slide that shows nuisance flooding. And nuisance flooding is an event that doesn't have to have a weather event. You could have a very sunny day, but when high tides are able to overwhelm, I'm going to say seawalls, get into the storm sewer system, it comes back up because there's no place for the water to go because it's high tide. You end up having a series of floods without a weather event. This has always been a function or happenance in Annapolis going way back when. The problem is that these nuisance floodings are occurring more and more frequently, to the point where we're forecasting out 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, unless there's major construction activity on additional defensive bulwarks. City of Annapolis is going to have nuisance floods a large percentage of the year. It affects transportation routes. It certainly affects businesses. It causes property damage, and it's a bigger and bigger issue, and it's all related to climate change. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. So the next one, we've talked a little bit about sea level rise. We've talked about nuisance flooding, and now we're going to talk about major weather events. Everybody's probably heard about the disastrous floods in the last 5 years in Ellicott City, which is in Howard County, smack dab in the middle of the state. And there are a couple of tributaries that flow into the Patapsco, and it comes right through the city. And what you're going to see on the scene on the left is the at the height of flood, there was 9.1 inches of rain that came in, completely overwhelmed the river system. And if you've been to Ellicott City, and they basically drain portions of it as they start the reconstruction, the river goes down 20, 30, 40 feet. It's not a little river, and it overwhelmed it to the degree that you see on the left. Now, the construction activity on the right, that's an artist illustration of what it will look like, because it is going to be basically terraforming within the city to try and find a mechanism to deal with the floods in the future, okay? So the point of these slides is to show you some examples of what's actually happening with climate change. And when we talk about climate change, it's not just warming. It's the fact that we have more and severe major storm events that none of our systems are able to handle. Mother Nature can't handle it, neither can the man-made systems we do through stormwater management. So the next slide. While we've shown you some problems that are being dealt with or attempted to be dealt with, my last couple of slides are important. because this May 2020, the state of Maryland passed Senate Bill 457, which allows local governments to create resiliency authorities. So any jurisdiction that has more than 30,000 people, whether it's a city or county, can create a funding structure which is designed to mitigate the effects of climate change, which includes rising temperatures, major rain and storm events, changes in precipitation patterns, and sea level rise. What this will do is allow local governments, and in this case, I believe you will see Arundel County, where I work, in addition to joining forces with the city of Annapolis to, I'm going to say, stand up an authority that will allow the authority to generate funds, whether it's from taxing efforts or fees, in a concentrated way to start dealing with the major expenses that are going to be necessary to offset the climate change realities. This is a really big thing that's coming down. I think it's been hung up a bit through COVID in the sense that it's difficult to take on new initiatives while everyone is kind of in the hunker down in the teleconference type of work environment. And then the next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. So this is a slide that talks about the Maryland Climate Leadership Academy. This is an educational program that I went through about this time last year. It's about 6 days, 10-hour days in class. It's really rigorous. There's a lot of science, a lot of data, a lot of social components to it. But one of the most important things we can do, I think, is to help ourselves, help our colleagues, is by becoming as educated as we can. And this is a program set up in Maryland. I would encourage you to just type in Maryland Climate Change Academy and you'll find all kinds of amazing information. The first 2 years that the program has been stood up, I believe the coursework is free. There are a variety of cohorts that are being established one after the other after the other. It's fascinating work. And whether you're a pediatrician, a social scientist, a land use engineer, a land use attorney, an artist, everyone benefits from becoming more educated in this, because as we talked about before, everything that we're talking about in this program is interrelated. So what I've tried to do is just share a couple of examples on the East Coast and the place that we kind of live and play of the real effects of climate change. And I think we're beginning to come together to deal with it. But as you've heard other speakers say, we don't have a lot of time. I will say one example in Anne Arundel County that climate change has played a real role is that in the development of our capital improvements program, which is all our major public facilities, we now have a system in place where the effects of climate change affect whether or not and when we will build public infrastructure in the future. It's having a pronounced impact. And I think that's a really good thing because so much of our public money goes in that arena. So with that, I think I'm set, and thank you.
Oh, Stephen, I can't imagine, a better quick update and so factual. And thank you for giving where people can learn and take that course if they choose to deepen their own activism on a local level. Thank you. And that's no bull behind you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Right now, speaking of the role of art, really in activism, etc., we have an esteemed scientist, Pablo Suarez. And Pablo is the Red Cross Climate Center Associate Director for Research and Innovation. And he came to me through my beautiful daughter, Belina, who's a sustainability expert and facilitator based in Berlin. And Pablo has worked with artist activists all over the world. So with that, Pablo, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm almost happy that COVID has kept you in one place, because I know you literally are a world traveler, and now they told you you can travel, so we got you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Belina, for the bridge, and thank you all for the opportunity to be with you today, despite this distance. We shall re-emerge with a different sense of shared identity and capability. So my name is Pablo. My strange accent comes from Argentina. There was a time when I was a carnivore, and now I am a carnivore who no longer eats meat. And there are several things that I hope to bring to these 10 minutes or so for your consideration. Let me see if I can make buttons to work. We know that technology can always play tricks on us. So there we go. I'm going to become a little smaller. And if I can, I will become a little bit more transparent. There we are. So, climate, risk, and art. What's the story about the secret life on Earth, and what does it have to do with humanitarian work? I work with a global team of the Red Cross, Red Crescent family called the Climate Center. I used to be a full-time researcher on climate and disasters, trying to use the language of mathematics to understand what is going on Earth, what it means for people to anticipate any extreme conditions, whether it's tomorrow's hurricane or this season's drought or long-term sea level rise, and try to do what we can to help people not suffer. Unfortunately for the planet, it's a lot of work. My team is beyond busy, and we have to try to help people understand and come to terms with a very, very painful reality. So I'm very fortunate that in order to get my humanitarian work done, I'm collaborating with unconventional partners like artists, designers, and humorists. So I'm going to make you work. You are going to think, what do you think of when you think of the word humor? Please go to the chat in Zoom and type one word or two if you want. What do you think of when you think of humor? Please share your thoughts. If it looks like it has nothing to do with what we're talking about, we'll find that bridge. Okay, I see there's fun, laughter, joy, funny. All these words and many others seem to have little to do with climate problems or humanitarian work. Here is a word cloud of the words that I have often heard from people. Did anybody say the word death?
Huh.
I ask because when I asked this question to cartoonist Bob Mankoff of legendary fame from the New Yorker magazine, he looked at me in the eye and said, death.
Huh.
Let me illustrate. I use this cartoon to show how I see the way our planet is heading. We're treating each other as if it were a normal day, having normal conversations. We could be on our daily couch, but guess what? We are on a trajectory to gradual change that will anytime become very abrupt and dangerous. Things change gradually until they change abruptly, and our systems are changing so abruptly. This is from a French meteorologist who, in seeing the anomalies in extreme temperatures,
wow,
he saw the scream. Now, if you are informed and sensitive, your only possibility in this current day and age is to feel like screaming. And whether you're an activist or an artist or a humanitarian worker or a scientist, we need to figure out how to confront this, how to continue to have our own ability to be who we are and to try to do good. I cannot be a good humanitarian if I don't find some source of illumination. So I'm going to share with you some unconventional approaches that we have used with my team and others in bringing art, design, and humor to our humanitarian work on climate issues. Let's disappear again. So this is from a workshop in Southern Africa in the Zambezi River floodplain. We're helping farmers come up with ideas and plans, executable plans for flood preparedness. And instead of talking under a tree, we used art and design and games to playfully practice what to do if the flood happens. If we did something with you on fire risk, we'd play a game with dice where if a certain thing happens, you have to go find the fire extinguisher. And guess what? That's when you notice that you don't know where the fire extinguisher is. Risk is something that may go wrong, and we treat it as if it won't happen. In this activity, you see the body language of these Southern African farmers having the muscles are speaking, that's action. But if you look at their faces, they're having a blast. And that's what we like about art, design, and humor. It engages people. We know from neuroscience that when you're having a good time, when you experience humor, memories are formed more solidly and are easier to access. This is from a collaboration with a dozen artists from the Republic of Vanuatu in the South Pacific. They turned data about disasters, tropical cyclones, category 3, 4, and 5, volcanic eruptions, El Nino, droughts, and so on. And they created 5 meters, 15 feet of embodiments of data, revealing patterns about seasonality, about frequency, about geography. This is a collaboration with another great museum in the US, the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art. They opened the door to us and our partners from science, from art, and from humanitarian work before the doors were open to the public. And we had performers, and we were coached into an early warning dance. And then we had small group discussions, and one of the groups came up with the idea of a heat wave flash mob. The tall fellow on the right that you see with a shaved head, his name is Zohar. He's a professional flash mob designer. We ended up finding some money to bring him to the UN Climate Conference in Marrakesh, in Morocco, where I was giving a talk, and in collaboration with Moroccan Red Crescent volunteers, they stormed in with music that sounded like camels, and they started doing this dance about what you should do if you have an extreme heat wave. And mind you, the temperature in that part of the world can easily go into the hundreds and tens and so on. And then when people in the UN Climate Conference bumped into each other, if they had been in this session, they started doing the dance of seeking shelter, drinking water, helping your neighbor, and resting. Now, interestingly, this performance was seen by someone from India who said, can we make it happen in my country? So without Zohar, with one of the members of our team, Rebecca, we trained the Indian Red Cross, adapting the dance, a more Bollywood-esque style. And they did it in a market in Delhi. And guess what? The head of security of the Delhi International Airport was present. And he said, can you please come do that at the airport, not only for the tourists that are coming and going, but also for the workers. And they did the heat wave flash mob on how to anticipate and address extreme temperatures with the workers who take your luggage and put it up on the plane at remarkably extreme high temperatures. And because of that, they learned and they changed their procedures to ensure that they could rest appropriately, that they could drink water appropriately. And they changed, maybe you'll get a little bit more delay in your flight, but people don't die. Art could help save lives. We have many more examples of how we have introduced art and creativity. This is yours truly almost 8 years ago at a session at the White House, where all my predecessors were given 5-7 minutes and gave a PowerPoint, and I instead had everyone stand up and play a game on hurricane preparedness when they threw frisbee at people. And when people have a good time, they're more willing and able to absorb bad news and to rethink what is it that we should be doing. These are the words that humorists think of when they think of humor. Of course, they know that fun and jokes are relevant, but when conceiving humor, they look at the word through the lens of conflict, risk, contradiction, incongruity, ambiguity, ridiculousness. What is absurd? Where's the danger? And it is with that that I want to bring you, all of you, as an invitation to think of art and science as the two things that need to work together to help us all notice that we're living in completely absurd times, dangerous times, where things need to happen that we have to do, where it's going up a tree to demand not bad action, or changing your habits of what you eat, or recognizing that certain islands in your state are in danger and you need to rethink your budgets. I'm very, very grateful to all of you for the opportunity to be here. And with 8 seconds to go according to my alarm, let me pass it over to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you know, you're only lucky, Pablo, that you weren't here physically, because I'd be tempted to hobble you to keep you right at our museum full time and in Baltimore where the needs are so great. I wasn't able to get on the chat for some reason, but when it comes to humor, we often quote Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde said exactly what you live. He said, if you're going to tell people the truth, make them laugh or else they'll kill you. So you have been brokering very difficult truths, and the baggage workers on those hot tarmacs in New Delhi. It's really an amazing sharing that you did today. I love sugar, obviously, and I had lived in Mexico and went to a part of Mexico called Hell, which is where the sugarcane fields always were. But this goes back 40 years ago. And now they have, it's hot, humid, there are a lot of snakes. It's always been terrible work. But now they have a crisis in the sugarcane world because the little bit of planetary rise in temperature and the incredible humidity has meant that they cannot give off enough of their perspiration and replenish with water, etc., so that the average age of sugarcane workers is now 42 because of kidney failure. So it may not sound, we share that with the public because I get where understanding where just 4 little degrees centigrade, why is that so catastrophic, or even 1 more degree. And we try to make that very plain. So we're hoping people who are climate change deniers come to see Our Secret Life of Earth, because it's physically a visual feast, but the facts that they learn going through makes it very hard without at least considering the truth behind your brilliant and all of our speakers' works. Do we have a question right now for Pablo? From from no questions yet for Pablo. Pablo, would you like to ask yourself a question? Is there something you want people to go by? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder what can we do to bring these 2 worlds, the worlds of art and the worlds of humanitarian work, together in a meaningful way. As you can imagine, it is not easy to tell people, sorry, I'm going to stop feeding the hungry and sheltering the homeless and healing the sick because I have to go hang out with Rebecca and her museum tribe. And yet what I find is that if I don't hang out with folks like you, we don't have enough inspiration. We don't have enough. Artists can collaborate with us by, first of all, imagining how difficult it is to even give the bandwidth to the talent, the beauty, the introspection, the outreach that you can give, but still finding what is it that can be so powerful in what you offer that will make us feel like shaken and wanting that bridge. We can, it takes patience, it takes love, and it takes compassion. And these are difficult times for those things, but we can. On the question about whether humor is very dependent on culture, of course it is. Humor usually works by getting you close to a cliff. Mm-hmm. There needs to be a frisson of danger. But if you go too far, you may offend. If you don't go far enough, you may come across as an idiot. Mm-hmm. What we do is to stay away from humor as jokes. Mm-hmm. A joke is a statement intended to provoke laughter. And there's a space for that. Belina is amazing at training people in the skill, the art of stand-up. Because I predominantly work with people from cultures I am not familiar with. I have worked in 65 countries. I'm constantly facilitating global meetings. I know that if I try to provoke laughter, I'll either offend or fall flat or not be understood. Instead, what we do is to use cartoons and other forms of humor almost like an invitation for a conversation. It's not like trying to make you laugh. It's like trying to show something that is confusing and a little bit silly or ridiculous, and yet connected to reality. The couple on the couch in the waterfall, that's not the way the word is, but it's a great metaphor for how the word feels. And that emotional truth can awaken. Fun is functional.
Oh, well, thank you with all my heart for what you brought us today and the very difficult work you see. Have you seen, has there any upside to COVID that you have seen that could be applied to climate crisis?
Well, upside is a dangerous word, of course. We wish this had never happened, but we knew it was going to happen. I grew up in my grandmother's house. She lived to 106. She was born in 1910, and her brother died during the 1918 pandemic. What we know is that this is a time of severe change that we don't choose. When we go back to a world without the virus threatening our lives, we have to not go back to our stupid, silly choices like burning fuel, like just flying around. I hope that this approach, of course, I would love to receive that hug, Rebecca. But if I could receive your love without the need to fly and burn fuel and change the world's climate by burning carbon, I would prefer that we develop new modalities of expressing affection and so on through a digital platform. I hope that COVID can help us realize that abrupt change is possible if we have to, and that certain things that we thought we needed, you know what, we can survive without them. And given the trade-offs, maybe we should re-examine the kinds of things that we believe we need, and we can transition towards a world that allows for those who are less privileged, those who are too young today, to not receive a burning planet.
There is a question which says, how can artists collaborate with you in the future? Is that something that you would welcome hearing ideas from?
Google Pablo Recross Art Climate, drop me an email, tell me what it is that you do. I promise you it will be hard to respond. I'm going to be offline for 2 weeks soon, so it may take some perseverance. But the short story is that we have collaborated on a very opportunistic way. So if we were having a conference in Peru and we needed to accomplish something, and there happened to be an artist that was working on that topic in that location, we found a way to make it work. If you do mushroom artistic videos and we're trying to promote a nutritious mushroom-based diet, we may have something to do together. It's also possible that what you offer is not relevant to us at the time that you reach out, but it's worth trying. Thank you again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pablo. We all thank you. So our final speaker is coming to us from Ecuador, and she was introduced to us by a very, very good friend of ours, Ed Snodgrass, kind of the king in understanding and the knowledge of green roofs at a global scale. So Liliana, we can't wait to see you as a scientist and as just such a sensitive, beautiful person who's seen our Secret Life of Earth show and been to Baltimore to share with us today.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I'm really happy to be here, be part of this amazing event. I'm really happy to share a little bit of what I do and my passion with all of you. Well, as it was said, my name is Liliana Jaramillo, and I'm from Ecuador. For those who don't know, where is it? It's in South America. It's a tiny country that we have different kind of environments, and you can travel within few hours from the mountains to the coast, or from the mountains to the jungle. And I had the privilege to be born here and raised, and I really had the opportunity to have a relationship with nature. Since I was a little child, I remember that we used to go for picnics and little trips with my family to these natural reserves, and it was so inspiring. I didn't realize I had a connection with nature, but when I started to seek what to do in college, I discovered I loved nature, and I really wanted to work around it. And I felt so passionate. I started to study biology, and I understood a little bit about all this complexity that nature involves. And not only in talking about ecosystems and ecology, but also understanding a little bit about genes and DNA. Everything is so complex that it's amazing how you can see that it's overwhelming for us as humans to understand and control everything. And that inspiration made me understand also that we have to respect nature, and it has a function that can be beyond our mental limits, and that's okay. So I got so passionate about biology, about conservation. I started to do a master's degree in Australia. Actually, I realized that I grew up with this kind of images within my childhood about species that are getting extinct. They are like, I remember this kind of posters during my childhood. And it wasn't a thing just for me and my country. It was like iconic species where like they were endangered. And when I went back to my local reality, I realized that I also had this kind of reality of extinction during my life while I was growing. I remember this beetle that I used to play when I was a child. And then when right now you can barely see this beetle in the city. And it's because we are just eliminating every single part of piece of land, of greenery in the city. And they don't have an habitat where to lay their eggs. So when I went to Australia, I saw that, and I realized there were the same problems in each and every single city and country. And I went to the other part of the world, and the things I pick up, the problems I picked up in every single city were common. And these problems in the city are things related with elevated temperature, heat waves, flooding, bad air quality, and also displacement of species population. So it was this moment, it was like really, I understood that we are doing something wrong. It's not a coincidence that every single problem is repeating in different parts of the world. It doesn't matter in what region you are. And I discovered during my master's degree that there was this thing called nature-based solutions. Actually, they are artificial structures, green infrastructure that is created and inspired by nature. What green infrastructure and nature-based solutions want to do is create this, solve the problems within the city, within a place, a landscape, making work these green spaces. So I got so inspired by this kind of buildings, the green walls, green facades, green roofs, that I figured, okay, I'm going back to Ecuador. I want to do that. It wasn't just a thing that, oh, this is amazing, you can like developed countries can do it. It was a thing that I want to create solutions within my country as well. And that's why I created Nativus. Nativus is a startup that I funded, and it seeks to reintroduce native plants in the city. And why native plants? The idea is to create these nature-based solutions with native plants because if you use regular plants, you can solve the problems of temperature regulation, flooding, and air quality. But if you use native plants, actually you are creating this functionality. You are increasing all the benefits of the green environments. It's not just aesthetical. It's a thing about creating an ecosystem, giving food and habitat to different species, but also it's a thing about reducing all the resources that you are using in your gardens, in your green areas. Native plants have been evolving during a very long time in a certain place, so they are adapted to very hard conditions, and sometimes you can need less maintenance and less watering for all these plants. So just in Ecuador, we have a huge diversity of plants. We have 17,000 native plant species, from which 4,500 are endemic. This means that they are just found in Ecuador. And 78% of this are in some way are threatened. So this is just a reality and a responsibility for us to create different strategies for conservation. But I give you this example just to see how a little country as Ecuador has this high diversity. We have a huge responsibility. Every single person in the planet lives in a region that has its own native plants, and we have lots of potential to preserve them if we have that consciousness. So I'd like to propose this change in the cities. And why in the cities? It's because more than half of the human population in the world currently lives in cities. So if we start a change in the cities, we are actually doing a lot. We can create a huge movement if we start doing conservation, not only in the natural reserves. It's also a matter of taking action within our own balconies, terraces, backyards. So this is very, very important because we want to involve people to be part of this trend, of this conservation movement. So what I do in Nativus is to reproduce native plants. There is not much information about how to reproduce and propagate native plants, our local native plants. So in the plant nursery, we are learning how to propagate them, we grow them, and we start trials in green roofs, green walls, in different parts of the urban environment in order to create that knowledge and give the tools to people to increase biodiversity in the city. Apart from this, and in a complementary way, we want not just to create this science about plant propagation, we want to rescue all the traditional knowledge around plants. Many of them are medicinal plants, and others are traditionally used. For example, in this photo, you can see people use some plants for making baskets. This is part of our culture, and it's very important to rescue it because many of this knowledge is just fading with time. It's also a matter of creating spaces where people can relate with nature and create their own relationship. As I had the chance as a child to create my own relationship with animals, with plants, with every single element of nature, is giving these little children that live in the city that opportunity to learn about native plants, about the ecosystems, about all the diversity we live in, and not just being surrounded by concrete. It's also a matter about creating spaces for sharing all the information we have and sharing information between generations. These photographs are from a project that I'm doing right now with ecological restoration in the urban environment. And we are working with the community, and it's amazing how you can see all the knowledge between generations that it's shared in this kind of spaces of workshops that we are creating. It's also a matter of collaboration. We love to start these conversations with other disciplines. We created spaces with artists and art students in a university where art students started to discover native plants through their own skills. So it's also a matter of creating these opportunities and see how to create consciousness within people that are not thinking on the environment in their whole career. It's also creating spaces for giving this a fluid conversation about environment. And it's also about getting creative. We wanted to create a huge message. Last year, we created this collection of native plant notebooks where we worked in partnership with a local illustrator and local artists. That what she did is to create this artwork for sharing the beauty of native plants. Native plants have been neglected for centuries here, and they are beautiful, and their function in the ecosystem is amazing. So we wanted to share that beauty in a notebook, and in the back part of the notebook, we wanted to share also a little bit about their function and their story. So the idea here is to spread the word in every single way we can, and also share that kind of feeling of, yes, we can do something within the city, and if you change a little bit in every single act of your life towards conservation or towards taking care of our planet, we can do it together, and we can be part, all of us, of a bigger change. And finally, I really want to thank you and let you with this question. If you are ready to be part of this change, I really want to encourage you, all the participants, to think about having a wild garden, to create these ecosystems within our own place and share a little bit of this space with nature. Thank you very much.
Oh, Liliana, that was so inspirational. I think the progression of speakers today, everyone just flowed one through the other. I wanted to say we do have a question, and it comes all the way from Central Texas, which we all know becomes beastly hot, and it continues to be. She said, can Liliana recommend a green roof, nature-based structure, growing medium for hot climate, really hot climate? Here in Central Texas, there is often drought and soil that does not hold moisture, causing roof gardens to fail.
Okay, so in every single city, usually the use of native plants is recommended for green roofs because they won't need much watering. For example, I would, that will be like very local, but I will recommend, yeah, like to seek. I think in the US you have lots more information about native plants. So drought tolerant species are like the best option for creating this environment, and you won't need much water. Also being assisted by professionals of green roofs. There are great industries in the US for creating all the technical part of making function of the drainage of the green roof, and also in the plant selection. But I highly recommend the use of native plants because they usually have this kind of adaptations for and features for resisting really harsh climates.
Oh, so wonderful. Well, I just want to thank all of our speakers today, everybody who stayed on and listened and shared it with open heart and mind. And of course, Dan and Gloria Logan for making it all possible for us. Again, it's recorded, so it will live on in perpetuity. And when I was 11 years old, I met someone early to the party of greening our cities. And that is a late Austrian artist, Friedrich Hundertwasser, and he created the most elaborate living buildings, often from old buildings. And if you look up Hundertwasser's, the town, where they would burn all the garbage, he made it so living to clean the air as the smoke would come out. So he said something wonderful I'll close with today. He said, you, meaning all of us, you are a guest of nature. Behave. We ought to all behave a lot better. And thank you for your life work that has enriched everyone. I can't thank you enough, as in my old staff. Thank you. Julia, we're giving you the last word. Amen to that.